Fans, welcome. I am Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis, and we are Liberty Blue. We scream about the Rangers so that you don't have to. This is episode 51, live on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, and we're available wherever you get your podcasts as well. Today's show is about Peter Laviolette to the Rangers. Maybe, I guess, I don't know. Radio silence elsewhere in Rangers Town. Nick, no news is good news, right?
I mean, we were talking about it right before we came on. At the very least, you can tell they're trying to do a good job in this hiring cycle. Maybe do a little bit more due diligence than they did the last time around, where they reached out to the Hurricanes and Penguins about hiring their NHL coaches, which was never going to happen, and then hired Gallant. That was it. They talked to three people and they only really talked to one. So at the very least, you could say, hey, we've learned something here. We're going to talk to multiple candidates. We're going to try and get a better understanding of what's going on. From what we understand, they've talked to a handful of people now. Jay Leach's name is out there as somebody that they've wanted to talk to. They got permission to talk to. We don't know if they've talked to him yet. We know for a fact they've talked to Mike Babcock. That's the only one we definitely know. They also requested the one assistant from Toronto, Carberry. Don't know if that interview has happened yet. So we're operating in the dark here, like most people. And unlike most people, we're not going to make shit up, which is part of what makes us good at this. Is we're not just here for the sake of getting some likes and interactions on Twitter. We're actually trying to sift through all of this bullshit, which brings us to the Friedman tweet, which the way you and I are in agreement on this, that is out there specifically to put pressure on the Rangers, whether that's a better offer or to hurry up and make a decision. Because we know Laviolette's been offered the Blue Jackets job, and we know he's been linked to other jobs that are open as well. Teams want to talk to him. So if this is a play for a better contract, or this is hey, hurry up and make your decision already, because if you don't, I'm going to take one of these jobs. That's really how I would read this interpretation of the news.
It just seems like another one of those examples where Peter Laviolette texted Friedman, and he's like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to send this tweet out because I need the Rangers to feel like there's pressure on them to speed this up. And so Elliot Friedman, because he wants information, and the NHL is like this, he did his boy a favor. And that's exactly what it reads. Because like there's no further facts to this. It's just like Friedman putting out a tweet that said, Laviolette is linked to the Rangers, or he's the favorite or whatever. That doesn't mean anything. Like that says nothing. Like that is a tweet that's like, hey, by the way, hey Rangers, hey, by the way, there's a guy that you talked to that you liked. His name is Peter Laviolette, and the Blue Jackets like him, and other teams might like him, so you might want to speed this up. Guys, like it just screams favor. Like I hate that the NHL is like this, because if Woj tweets something in the NBA, and this is something that I've been yelling about, for years and years now, like in other major sports, if Woj or Shams tweet something, they do the occasional favor, sure, but with like coaching news, there is concrete evidence and facts. There is none of this. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Like, hey, put this word salad out on Twitter that actually doesn't mean anything, but I want you to do it as a favor. Like that, this kind of thing doesn't happen in other sports. So it's so baffling, and it's really irritating to me that the NHL has grown accustomed to this kind of mentality by the NHL insiders. Is the insiders will get zero unless they continuously prove to management and these coaches and these players that they are valuable. Because if Friedman doesn't put that tweet out that is giving Laviolette this favor and is shining this massive light on him, then once Laviolette gets his next job, where is he going to get the info from if he doesn't scratch Laviolette's back right now? So this is the whole back and forth situation where in other sports, I'm not trying to pretend that other sports don't have this. For sure they do. I'm not trying to be naive here. Of course this happens in other sports. But to this level, I mean, the NHL is just blatant with this kind of, I scratch my back, you scratch mine later down the line. Like, this is just so blatant. The tweet from Friedman says nothing. All it says is that, hey, like, hey, Rangers, by the way, there's that guy that you like. You might want to talk to them again. That's it.
And the other part of that becomes self-fulfilling, and how it becomes kind of the way news is reported is because there's not a lot of information out there to begin with in hockey. And then you have the aggregators, who are people who just listen to podcasts, read blogs, read tweets, and then they produce content based on that. And then that becomes part of the news cycle. And then people start reading the content that they interact with usually, and it becomes self-fulfilling. Because for the casual person, for the person who's not constantly scrolling Twitter on Facebook, only on once or twice a day just to get the news or word of mouth, talking with people, like my uncle, who's not very online but casually online, has occasionally he'll text me like, oh, did you see this, did you see that? And he texted me on Saturday, he goes, what do you think about Laviolette? And I go, oh, you saw it. Yeah. That's the kind of information cycle that this feeds to, is the person who's casually online. And it's how groundswell momentum builds for this. It's the same thing with how the Patrick Kane news started, where one or two people saying it keeps getting content, because the content machine always needs to be fed. If you don't tweet anything, you don't produce a video, you don't write a blog, you lose your foothold, and someone else is going to do that. And that's where we get into people who just repeat what Elliot Friedman said as if it was their own news. We get this self-fulfilling cycle where it becomes a game of telephone, where you adjust the news slightly, you reword it slightly, and then suddenly it's your reporting. And then if you're right, oh, I got this in my cap now. It's something I can say, I was right about this. And it kills it, because at this point, as someone who is reasonably plugged in, who tries to be as informed as they can, I have fatigue at this point. There is nothing even remotely compelling going on with the Rangers right now. And we need a coach, and they need to figure out the rest of this lineup. And we're still a good month away from the draft, which, if there's going to be wheeling and dealing, this is all we're going to have until they hire a coach, is this slow tap drip of useless information that like you said, it doesn't mean anything. I can't do anything with this. If we're talking about pursuing a player, we can go watch the tape. We can go look at their statistics. We're talking about Peter Laviolette for the third week in a row now. I can go look at his records on Wikipedia. I can go look at his impacts on teams, on things like expected goals, player usage, whatever. But it's not the same thing, because when we're talking about a coach, understanding what makes a coach successful in one place doesn't necessarily mean they can be successful somewhere else. Because Peter Laviolette had success with Nashville, or some success with Washington or Philadelphia or Carolina, he doesn't have access to any of those players. You think that because he had success at those other places that you can get him to instill his style, his philosophy, his identity on your guys. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of what made him successful in those other places.
Your tweet about it was really good the other day, when you said, like, oh, we're hyping up coaches with standard definition clips now. Like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, like I saw more than one person tweet a clip from the 24/7 from 2011 when he was the coach of the Flyers. You know who's in that video? Wayne Simmons, Scott Hartnell, and Claude Giroux. 3 guys who one of them is still in the league. We're talking about the average NHL career for a player is 4.5 seasons. We're talking about 2 average NHL careers ago. I'm supposed to be excited about this?
3.
Like, well, yeah, 3, because what was that, 12 years ago? Yeah, basically 3 full 3 full NHL careers ago. Yeah. And when you get to that point, and this is something we can talk about, the professional coach, the one who always is working, who doesn't take any time off. Like, typically in other sports, you do a year of TV. You do a year where you meet with other coaches, you write a book, maybe. You gotta pay your dues a little bit to get back in, or you have to be an assistant somewhere. This is very prevalent in football and basketball, where if you want another chance, unless you've got an amazing lights out resume, unless you're Doc Rivers, which at this point I don't understand, but that's a different story for a different podcast.
I've heard a lot of things about Doc Rivers over the course of my 4+ years at NBA Radio. Let me tell you something. It's just, I don't know how that man, like, I don't know. I don't know how after what happened this season, how you hired Doc Rivers again, but that's, again, different.
It's the same general principle, though. These guys the ones who don't put that extra time in, who don't take the year off, who don't take the 2 years off, who try and like tinker, retool, you become a professional coach. It becomes hard for you to make a real impact because you're so used to repackaging your messaging every couple of years to a new group that it's very easy to get into autopilot, because Peter Laviolette was in Washington for 3 years. That's not a significant amount of time to kind of
No.
foster connections or relationships. And because the shorter your cycles, the easier. You saw this happen in real time with Gerard Gallant, who has been pretty consistently working for the last couple of job cycles. He'd been job 3 straight times, didn't take any years off between those. He didn't have any real time to kind of work on himself as a coach, to tinker with his X's and O's, to retool his philosophies. And really quickly, within a year and a half, the Rangers were already like, all right, he's full of shit. He's phoning this in. He's not getting the best out of us. We know he's not going to help us. And it shut off. And really quickly, it is really quick for these coaches to lose their rooms. And the ones like Laviolette, like Gallant, who are consistently working, don't have time to improve themselves as coaches. So they're just repackaging the same thing over and over again.
I talked to somebody who is way more plugged into the Capitals than I am, and I reached out and I'm like, hey, just tell me about Laviolette, the person, the coach, etc. And they basically gave Laviolette poor grades and everything except for X's and O's. Not the worst coach in terms of like actual game planning, but everything else is kind of like he's kind of a nothing burger, which is like that in and of itself is.
He's risk averse. That is the biggest thing.
That's a red flag to me. Yeah. Because that's what you had in Gallant.
Yeah.
Like the same guy who, I guess he had a decent game plan going in, but he never adjusted after the puck is dropped. But coming in, perhaps he had a decent game plan and was pretty miserable at everything else. Laviolette's the same coach. He's the same guy. Just a different name. Like that's that it would be such a lateral move. Why fire Gallant if you're just going to hire Laviolette? It's the same guy, just a different name tag. Like what is the point?
That's exactly where I've been since about the Wednesday following the Saturday of them firing Gallant. Was none of these coaches were particularly impressive. If you had the slam dunk hire lined up where as soon as you fired Gallant, within a week you were going to have your guy lined up ready to go, okay, I get it. But just firing your coach for the sake of firing your coach, to just shake things up, is chasing the short-term fix, the sugar high, the whatever expression you want to use. It's not addressing your real organizational issues. You have more than just a coaching issue with the organization, with the roster right now. Just changing the coach is not going to change a whole lot. Maybe you get one good season out of Laviolette if he ends up being the coach. Year 2, you will get basically what you just had happen with Gallant. You will have the young guys who don't get a lot of opportunity because the coach is risk averse. He's trying to play it safe. He's trying to win every single game in the regular season to get to the playoffs. Then when he gets to the playoffs, he wants to play a very, very low event style of game. Laviolette particularly has bad offensive impacts once his teams get leads because big fan of the turtle. Him and AV probably two most aggressively defensive coaches I can think of in that respect of once you get a lead, stop pushing forward. Defensemen stop pitching up, worry about defense, and then you end up playing the whole third period in your end, kind of like what Team USA and David Quinn did over the weekend where they had a big lead, they blew the lead after turtling, and then lost in overtime because they're risk averse. I'd rather go down swinging than hiring somebody purely because he's safe. At this point, the Rangers have done safe. It's time, like you and I have said now for 2 straight episodes, if you are going to fire Gerard Gallant, that is a whole rebuke of that mindset of the conservative, the risk averse, the same old standard of just get in the playoffs and whatever happens when you get there happens. It's time to take a big swing because you see what happens to the teams that take swings. Sure, sometimes you strike out when you swing, but at least you tried something you hadn't before. And that's what I really hope this process bears out to, is just at least try something different. Because Gallant, Laviolette, not a huge difference between them, like you just said.
No, it's the same person. Like it's the same person, different face. Like this is it. Why? Like I just said, what was the reason behind firing a coach that is Gerard Gallant and his style and the way that he approaches the team and all, like everything that's associated with being a head coach? If you are then going to hire a person that has the exact same style of coaching, what is so fundamentally different about
he's an asshole?
Peter Laviolette?
That's the difference. He's the aggressive, yelling asshole as opposed to Gallant, who wants to be everyone's friend. That's the difference.
But at a certain point, you gotta, yeah, but like if he's the same in every other aspect, then how much of a drastic change is that really? Because okay, like you'll have a coach that will yell, but after a certain while, if the coach keeps on
You
yelling, the
get
players are
tired
gonna
of
tune
that.
him out. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like the
Bingo.
players are gonna tune them out. So like if you're not swinging for the fences like you talked about, then what's the point? If you wanted to hire somebody that's going to yell, either one, you should have done it before you hired Gallant, or two, you get an assistant coach in there that will do that for Gerard Gallant. You get, if you want that kind of that punching bag, if you will, of like just somebody in there that will
You need the
scream
bad
and
cop. You
yeah,
need the good cop,
if you
bad
want a
cop. Yeah.
bad cop in there, then you get an assistant coach under Gallant to do that for him and have that kind of
Or
back and
hear me
forth
out, Andrew.
duality. Yeah.
You have a captain that can do
Oh,
that
oh,
because
oh, oh.
ideally
He threw
that
the
would be the
helmet, Nick. I
counterbalance.
mean, what else he's supposed to do? He threw the helmet and he also throws shoulder hits. I mean, like that's about it. Like, what else do you want the captain to do, Nick, for $8 million a year? I don't know, but like it's just you have to shift your thinking, because if you hire one coach and then after 2 seasons you're like, this is clearly not working, why then are you going to the same coach? Like that doesn't
Or using the same
that would make
process
no
to
sense
get
to
to
me.
the same coach. That would be my addendum to that is similar coach, but get it using the same process. Like
Yeah.
we always talk about this. If you have good process and you don't get good results, at least you're trying to do the right thing. But if you just did something and it didn't work, where you kind of just took the best veteran retread coach around, very quickly burned his way out on his way, burned out very quickly, why would you run it back and do the exact same thing? Only difference is your core players are all 2 years older and your young players lost a year and a half, 2 years of their development cycle. That's the real issue here. You need a coach who can do two different things. You need somebody who's going to bring Chytil, Kakko, Lafreniere, K'Andre Miller, Braden Schneider along, while also being able to tap into Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck, Panarin in a way they haven't been before. And typically speaking, those are two different skill sets, the developmental coach and the veteran who can kind of tap into experienced guys a little bit more. And that's really the conundrum the Rangers have, is they have a roster set up for two very different things right now. They have young guys who they don't trust, and they have older guys who are expensive and not declining yet, but on the verge of starting that downhill decline. And that's really where we get to the challenge of this all. And that's what we started with when they fired Gallant the Saturday. That Monday we said, there is not a coach out there that makes sense for this, because this is more than just a coaching issue. The roster, the way it is constructed, makes this a really challenging job, and I understand why a coach might be reluctant to take this job. And the other part of this is, if Drury messes this coach up, he's not getting another coach, more than likely. He is not getting another coach if this does not go right. That's the other part of this that I think, I don't want to say people are missing, but that's why I think he's been so patient. I mean, they hired Gallant pretty quickly in the last job cycle because they wanted to get out in front. Drury wanted to put his stamp on that team. They got the new coach in there. They went out and made the trades they did for the older, veteran, gritty guys to kind of have a higher floor, which is kind of what Gallant was brought in to do. And now there's no obvious roster surgery to be done. You use the coach as the scapegoat. Now, if you bring back a veteran retread coach, you're essentially saying it was just the coach's fault, not the player's fault. And then if the coach flops, then there's no more hiding it. It's 1,000% on the guys on the team.
Right.
And you admit your roster has a fatal roster construction flaw, but you've wasted another 2 years. And then at that point, Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck, Panarin are all 32, 33, 34, and your veteran core is on the decline, where they're going to be all offense, no defense, even more than they already are. And you're going to not be able to do major roster construction. The only real saving grace the Rangers potentially have is, in a year or two, if the salary cap goes up $6, $7, $8 million, sure. But preying on that to be your savior for your roster construction, that's putting a lot of eggs in the basket of the NHL getting its act together. And it's the same issue they've had. I mean, they threw all that money at Panarin and Trouba, operating under the assumption the cap was just going to keep going up, keep going up. Obviously, there's no way to predict a pandemic, but that type of lack of financial foresight is why you're at where you're at now, where you're going to have to give up draft picks to get rid of Barclay Goodrow. you still need to sign a backup goalie, a sixth defenseman, at least two wingers, and what are you going to do? You have $11 million or so, something like that, to sign all of that and your restricted free agents. Really quickly, you run out of money if you try and throw money at your problems, which, again, seems like what the Rangers are going to do here. They're going to pay Gallant not to coach their team, throw money at another coach, and say, it's not the player's fault, it's the coach's fault, which, again, two playoff runs in a row now. We have real hell. For as far as Kreider, Zibanejad, you have playoff runs going back to Alain Vigneault as evidence to be that maybe these guys aren't your elite. They are not the driving force on a Stanley Cup team. I got into this argument a lot, and we're going to do an entire episode about this at some point this summer, but Mika Zibanejad's not a first-line center on a team that wins the Stanley Cup. I feel very confident in saying that, and I don't think the Rangers are willing to acknowledge that, and that's a real problem with their roster construction.
I don't disagree. I mean, like, he definitely did not play well against the Devils. He did play well before. I mean, last year's run, he was one of the best players on the team. So it's tough for me to definitively say one way or the other because he had such a solid run, not this past season, but the last year. But this year,
he was pretty ass in that pitch. Sid had him in hell until
I totally understand. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, he didn't have great moments in every series, and this year he was terrible for sure. There's no doubt about it. The thing about Laviolette as well, and the guy that one of the people that I talked to a couple of people about the Caps, and they had the same kind of thing about him in that he doesn't trust his young guys.
Nope.
Which we just had. Gerard Gallant didn't trust the young guys. David Quinn didn't trust the young guys. So now you're going to have the third coach in a row who doesn't trust the young guys. Like, what? At that point, trade all the young guys. Like, it's...
Hey, Andrew, we're getting to that point now where that is the breaking case of emergency move this summer, is they sell low on Lafreniere and get a middle six forward in return for him, and he goes somewhere where he's going to get a real run. And the last point on this before we move on, and we can talk about whatever for the last 5-10 minutes, it speaks to the organizational issue. They think the kids, whatever they get from them, is an added bonus. That it is their star players are good enough most nights that whatever they get from the bottom six is just gravy on top of that. That's one issue. And then number two, which ties back to what you just said about David Quinn, that tells you that this is an organizational issue. This isn't just the coach. This isn't the roster only. It is that up to the GM, up to the owner of the team, because that 56-game season was the perfect opportunity to just throw shit at the wall, and whatever stuck. But instead, David Quinn played Colin Blackwell more minutes per game than the first overall pick in the draft that year, because he felt if he didn't win enough games and make the playoffs, he was going to lose his job, which is what ended up happening. So that tells you that this is an organizational issue. The Rangers always have thought they're a little better than they actually are, and it's always bared out when you think about the roster construction and their formula to win with that roster. It's great you have the best goalie in the world or one of the best goalies in the world. He cannot score goals too. That's the issue.
Well, that's been the issue since Lundqvist. This has been the issue for the past 20 years in Rangerstown of we have the best goalie in the world, so everybody else just go out there and make stuff happen, and your goalie will just magically win the day. And that is how Henrik Lundqvist has ended his entire career without a Stanley Cup ring, is because he was so good, but the rest of the team couldn't just be average and just win for him. Like, when you have the best goalie in the world playing for you and you couldn't even deliver one ring to him in his entire career because your goalie masked so many of the issues that kept appearing playoff after playoff after playoff run. Well, we're seeing it again with Shesterkin. Like, hey, Shesterkin's there. He's one of the best goalies in the world. He's doing everything he can. He's masking a lot of the issues, and the Rangers are fixing none of them. It's almost as if you just watched a movie from start to finish, and then you thought, oh, I'm going to watch this movie again. And this is kind of what we're seeing with the Rangers.
This is a remake.
This is the same exact thing.
They didn't even wait 20 years to, like, the grace period you give a movie before you remake it. They ran that shit back straight back. They got lucky with a goalie they put in the incubator over in Europe for a while, brought him over. He was really good right out of the gate, masked a lot of issues, makes players. I really hope that somewhere in the language of Dan Girardi, Mark Stahl, any defenseman who got paid while Henrik Lundqvist was the goalie. Hank was getting royalties, like he was getting like 3%. Like the agent cut is 3%. The Henrik Lundqvist cut got to be at least 5% for getting these guys paid, because it's one of the weakest points of statistical analysis, because we're still not good at evaluating defense in hockey. So what do we use? Goals against. The Rangers were really good in goals against this year. That's because they had one of the best goalies in the league, not because they play good defense.
Yep.
Watch the team play, and it really gets frustrating because we are doing the same exact thing again. Even if you get a good coach in here, and even if, let's say, it's Knobloch, it's Jay Leach, it's Carberry, it's Jeff Halpern, it's whoever, it's not a retread. Okay, you've got 2 years. Win the Stanley Cup or you're fired. This is a great opportunity, though, if you want it. That's what bears out, and why I'm so kind of apathetic to it all. I don't think there's a coach who can get the best out of this group.
Well, maybe, and who wants this job? If you're a new coach, for example, if you have been an assistant coach for a long time or a head coach in the AHL like Chris Knobloch, and you want your shot, you want the opportunity to prove to the NHL that I am a National Hockey League head coach, and the best offer is a 2-year deal from the Rangers, and it'll
be 4. You'll get a good pay.
4. Like, even if it's 4 and you get fired after 2, like, you have a 4-year deal on the table, but if you don't win the cup within the first 2, you're shown the door.
That's what's gonna happen. That's exactly what's gonna happen.
As someone, like, if I was an assistant coach or a prospective NHL head coach, it's like, there's better offers, man. Like if
whoever gets that Columbus job has got 4 to 5 years to kind of figure it out.
Right. Like if there is another offer on the table from somebody that isn't expecting cup or bust within the first 2 seasons of me being a coach, and I want to be a first-time head coach, I'm for sure taking that deal as opposed to the Rangers. And we are Rangers fans. We want the best for the team, but you gotta think about it from the perspectives of incoming first-time NHL head coaches.
Or you have to be stupid. That's the other thing. Well, if you're David Quinn and you walk naively into a situation,
I guess, yeah. Like if you have the ego of somebody that's like, I can do it. How hard could it possibly be?
Yes.
Then I guess you want it. But reasonable people, if you're an assistant coach, AHL head coach, etc., you look at this Rangers job as a bunch of red flags. Because if you don't have immediate success within the first 2 seasons of your job, you are shown the door. And try convincing other GMs around the league that it wasn't your fault. Try doing that. Because
in the NHL,
because Jim Dolan is going to call every GM in the league. I don't even know if he has their numbers or their names. He'll have somebody do it for him. He will call the other 31 GMs in the NHL and say, "Don't hire this guy because he can't coach a team to success." That's it. Like the prospective head coaches right now are looking at this and rightfully aren't enthused about it. Like, I understand, as a New Yorker, you're like, oh well, the lights are too bright for these people, and it's like, you got to think about this logically. Cup or bust within the first 2 years, or you're fired for a new head coach. Okay, and if you get fired, who's going to hire you? Like, you have to think about this logically and say, for a first-time head coach in the NHL, this isn't the prettiest job. And the roster construction, as we talked about, is kind of up in the air. They're kind of stuck between two minds. They don't know which way they want to go. And for a first-time head coach, you want, teams to give you space, give you time to, one, adjust, two, to have the players adjust to you, et cetera, et cetera. The Rangers don't have that. It is either you win right now or we are letting you go and finding someone else. That's it. And it's not a great look for first time head coaches. But at the same time, retreads are boring as hell and they don't fix anything. So if you're the Rangers, what do you do?
Hey man, I don't know. I've been reading the Paul Maurice propaganda that's been out there because Bobrovsky turned
Don't
into a
even
new.
get me started.
Paul Maurice is the reason Sergei Bobrovsky turned into a Vezina winning goalie
Right.
again. If you read the
Of course.
propaganda,
Yeah.
that's the all right. This is the last point I want to make, and if there's anything else you want to get in before we wrap up, we are all way too uncomfortable with how random hockey is, and it's why we have to assign credit or blame to places where it maybe not necessarily deserved. Paul Maurice is the perfect example of they were fine, they snuck in, the goalie got really hot. They already had a pretty decent core, and it was just a matter of kind of getting the lights to go on for certain guys. And sure, you give Paul Maurice a little bit of credit for that, but writing full on like 1,500, 2,000 words, Paul Maurice is 5 months away from hockey is the reason the Panthers are where they are now. That's good and all, but they got lucky. They beat Boston in a game 7. That's really what I wanted to talk.
If Marchand scores that breakaway,
yeah,
none of this happens. Like none of this is like this. Sergei Bobrovsky is the reason the Panthers are here. And Tkachuk as well. Like those two guys are reasons number 1 and 2 why the Panthers are here. Like the issues on the Panthers haven't just suddenly disappeared. The issues are still there. Like
they're still playing Mark Stahl a lot of minutes.
Mark Stahl, he's seeing out of one eye, and how he's still even playing the NHL is a credit to him, and I guess a credit to the NHL for continuing to give him jobs. But like my man's is not very good at hockey. So the issues on the roster is still there, but Sergei Bobrovsky has turned from a middling goaltender with a massive contract to all of a sudden the best goalie in the world, and now he's on a 6-week tear through the league.
Yeah.
Like that's what got them here. And yeah, I mean, Tkachuk has been playing really well. Barkov and all these guys have, clicked at the right time, etc. But if Bobrovsky doesn't make the saves, they're not here. So
shout out Rangers legend Anthony Duclair.
Yeah.
It took a while for him to stick, but once he figured it out, it really clicked for him. We could use a 30-goal right winger. It would be nice.
I remember back in the day when Keith Yandle was going to be a Ranger, the initial tweet was Dan Girardi was going the other way. And that, I think I was on the bus home from school or something along those lines, like when this happened. And I was the happiest guy on the bus. I was like, oh my God, like this is it. This is it. The Rangers are finally learning. They're getting a bad defenseman out and they're getting a good one in. Let's go. And then none of it happened and they lost. So my hopes and dreams were crushed, and they continue to be crushed by an organization that doesn't see their own issues. But for the Florida Panthers, like Paul Maurice, he's been okay at best leading up to the playoffs, and then Bobrovsky turned into the best goalie ever. There's your answer. So nothing about Paul Maurice has drastically changed from game 46 of the regular season to now. He's the same guy, same coach, same roster. Bobrovsky's the answer. That's it. There's your Athletic article in 2 words. Sergei Bobrovsky. That's it. Pay me, please.
That's really all I wanted to tie it up on is we all kind of, there's a lot of randomness in hockey, and that's just part of the calculus. And always looking for blame doesn't always lead you to the right answer, which I think is largely the thing the Rangers have really struggled with in the last couple of years, especially is understanding why they're losing things, why they're having a hard time against certain teams. And it's why they've gone for the easy fixes, why they've done the retread coach, why they tried to bolt on guys from other organizations who had credibility, or just artificially bringing in guys who are big, regardless of their hockey skill.
Nick. He tall.
Hey, that's really perfect example. We both were in agreement. I remember every now and then I go back and look at the tweet I tweeted 5 minutes after they signed Nemeth. That was like, I tweeted, Nemeth is perfectly fine. God, I was generous at the time, but he's perfectly fine. But to give almost $3 million and a limited no move clause to somebody who has never really shown any offensive inclination and only trading for him because he's big and Swedish, you are going to waste your money. You could have gotten John Merrill. You could get Radko Gudas, who is actually decent as a big defenseman. That's really all I wanted to tie it up with, is just hockey's got a lot of randomness, and just looking for someone to blame instead of trying to honestly ascertain why you failed is why the Rangers are where they are right now. I don't think Gallant was a great coach by any stretch, but just putting the blame on his feet is the easy way out. It is not looking the real answer in the eye, the real problem in the eye. And now we sit here waiting. That's really all I've really got at this point is we're waiting. I'm hopeful the Rangers make a good decision, but I'm not optimistic they will.
We have no answers. For the Rangers, it's a lot of radio silence. There has been, and the Rangers have stopped virtually all the leaks. There's no news is coming out unless they want it to come out via a leak or somewhere else. Like unless they give Brooksy or Molly or Vince like some piece of information, the odds are that any breaking news isn't going to come out via them or any other insider. So it's just a waiting game. And listen, like at a certain point, the Rangers are doing the right thing by waiting. It's not that they're doing a poor job because they're waiting. It's the names that are being reported through the whole process. Peter Laviolette is the same person as Gerard Gallant. Like these, and if he's the favorite, thanks Elliot Friedman for that, whatever that means. Like it doesn't instill the confidence that we want in terms of the search for a head coach. If you are really waiting, if you are really putting in the time and the effort and the investigative, people on this case to really find the best coach out there, and the favorite is Peter Laviolette, then what is the rest of the search for? Like the Rangers have to do a better job of either hiring Carmen Sandiego to do to help them in their search, or they got to start at square one, because this is they're just going around in circles right now.
Anything else you want to get in? Who's winning tonight? Dallas or Vegas?
Give me Dallas. Let's go Stars.
Okay, let's do it. Celtics or Heat?
I tweeted this out earlier today, and I am the biggest Miami Heat fan tonight, only because if the Celtics win, people in New England will never let anybody else hear the end of it. They will never stop talking about this. They will bring it up at every function, at every conversation on the street. They will stop you in the middle of your walk or your audio book.
The Celtics are the Bulls, Andrew.
And they'll be like, "Hey, do you remember that time where the Celtics came back from 0-3 down against the Heat? Can you believe it? Can you believe it?" I am the biggest Miami Heat fan tonight. Please, Jimmy Butler, you've talked so much over the past couple of weeks. You did the timeout to Al Horford in his face, and the Celtics have destroyed you for 3 straight games after that. I am begging you, drop 150 points. Please, Miami, I am begging.
Okay. With that'll do it for this week's episode of the Liberty Blue Podcast. Make sure you subscribe. Available on all the major podcasting platforms, YouTube as well. Live every Monday, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, 6 o'clock. If they hire a coach, we'll do best we can to go live as quick as we can. Hopefully it's not Peter Laviolette. We'll see you guys whenever they hire a coach or next Monday.
All right. Sounds good. Later.